Okay, hello everybody. Just about ready to start, less than a minute to go. Hello everybody. Just about ready to start. Okay. And a few people checking in the chat. Okay, ready to start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, this week is the final installment in the series on the hindrances and jhana factors. I've been going through the 5 nivarnas and the 5 jhana factors, and their one-to-one correspondence, which is based on a section in the Visuddhimagga. And the idea is that the entrance into deep samadhi and jhana is really a natural progression of mind towards a more simpler, more primordial kind of state of mind. And it's obstructed by these hindrances. And there are 5 jhana factors, and each jhana factor is particularly obstructed by one of the 5 hindrances. And we're going through the list in the order of the jhana factors. So today we're dealing with the jhana factor of Ekagattā and the hindrance of Kāmacchanda. Ekagattā is the one factor of the list of 5 that's present in all 4 jhanas. So it's basic to jhana. And many of you will probably be familiar with the standard translation, which is one-pointedness. That's grammatically defensible, but I don't really like that translation, and I've been using the alternate translation of unified mind, or mind gone to oneness. This would be a literal translation. Ekagattā is the word is a compound in Pali, and often the compounds are ambiguous depending on how you break them up. And I think that gone to oneness is also acceptable grammatically, and it certainly I think has a better connotation and is more useful than one-pointedness. I would like to caution that some people I've found have taken unification of mind, or gone to unity, gone to oneness. They've taken it the wrong way. We're not here referring to something like the Upanishadic one mind. We're not talking about some vast cosmic experience. We're talking something much simpler. The fact that the mind that has Ekagattā is not divided against itself. Like the ordinary mind in the world is constantly changing objects, from sense impressions, from sight to sound to touch, to mental formations, thoughts and emotions, sensations in the body, and so on. And the mind is not unified. It's divided in that it's constantly flitting around. And what we're seeking to do with samatha meditation is developing a unified mind that's steady on a single object. This is a deepening of samadhi. Samadhi means stillness or non-wavering. And Ekagattā is a very closely related factor. It means the mind is entirely occupied with a single object. So it's unified in that sense. The reason I don't like one-pointedness as a translation is the same reason I don't like concentration as a translation for samadhi, even though those two are the standard translations now. Because I find it's counterproductive for meditators and for practical use of trying to develop deeper states of mind to think of it in terms of concentrating to a point. That's too forceful and it's too narrow. You shouldn't be trying to narrow the mind down onto the object. You should have a vast, open, expansive, spacious mind, but a still one. That's the objective that you should be working towards, is stillness and steadiness on the object. So I like to say that the best way to think about it is not to put the mind on the breath, but to let the breath fill the mind. You can think of the image of the mind as being a vast open space, and the breath is like the waves of the ocean, filling it up, going in and out with the tides. And the mind doesn't move, the cavern doesn't move, the water moves. So one-pointedness and unity and stillness are the objectives to be sought for developing of jhana. And Ekagattā, as I said at the outset, as a jhana factor, it's the only one of the 5 jhana factors that persists through all 4 jhanas. It's present from 1st jhana to 4th jhana, and it's the kind of bedrock on which the other factors operate. Now, the hindrance that is particularly referenced as obstructive of unity is sense desire, Kāmacchanda. And in the context of developing jhana, this means even subtle sense desire. Obviously, when we think of sense desire, the first things that come to mind are very obvious sense desires like food and sex. But we're not, and that's obvious. We don't need to talk about that. It's obvious that if the mind is preoccupied at that level, it's not going to become unified or attain jhana. But what's less obvious is the subtle movements of the mind out through the sense doors. Because jhana is one way of thinking of jhana. One way it's described in, for example, the Abhidhamma, is a shift in consciousness from one level to another, from the level of sense experience, is more than sense desire, just like being based in the senses. That's called the Kamabhumi, the level of sense, to the Rupa Bhumi, or level of form, that transcends sensuality altogether. The Brahma gods who dwell at that level as a default mode of consciousness, they're not interested in sensual objects. They don't have gender, so they have no interest in sex, and they don't eat in the ordinary way, so they have no interest in food. And the only sense organs that operate for them are sight and hearing, and they're only functional. They're not used as objects of pleasure. But they experience great pleasure and bliss internally. This is piti and sukha. And these internal states of mind are what we're seeking when we meditate towards jhana. We're trying to go inwards and experience these inner states. The pure happiness praised by the Buddha, the blameless happiness divorced from the senses, is the way he phrased it. And as long as the mind is going out through the sense doors, even in very minor ways, then that's an obstruction to unifying the mind. The sense desire level of existence is the very opposite of unity. Of all the different realms of existence, sense desire realm is the most complex, the most diverse. The most diverse of any realm of existence is the animal kingdom, which is included within the sense desire realm. But the range of diversity is greater than that, because everything from the hell beings, the ghosts, the animals, the humans, and the 6 levels of sensual devas are all included here. And the beings in this level of existence, which includes us as humans, our ordinary mode of consciousness operates through the senses, the physical senses. And even our internal life, our thoughts and emotions, by nature, are ordinarily directed towards experiences of the sense, either remembrances of sense objects or desire for sense objects, or fear of unpleasant sense objects. We're entirely obsessed with the senses. So it's quite difficult for us to disengage from that. That's why one of the important aids to meditation, particularly on a retreat, if you're doing an extended period of meditation, is indriya samvara, sense restraint, trying to go out through the senses as least as possible. Now, this includes, things that are actually quite harmless in a general context, like, looking out the window or listening to the birds, or, something like that. Because you're going out through the senses, you're getting not even necessarily, maybe pleasure, but just diversion or amusement or interest out through the senses. Then that keeps you stuck in that lowest level of consciousness, and you can't experience the transition to jhana. Now, this is the nirvana of Kāmacchanda, or sense desire. It's the desire to go out through the senses and experience things through the sense organs. So it's the purpose of the taking the 8 precepts is an aid to sense restraint, because it adds additional restrictions that shut off various avenues of diversion through the senses, like snacking at any time of the day, or watching entertainment, or beautifying the body. All these things are cut off by the practice of the 8 precepts. And it should be said that the 8 precepts, properly understood, the additional precepts are not, strictly speaking, ethical. They're restraint. They're for purposes of sense restraint. There's nothing unethical or sinful about eating in the afternoon, but there's a precept against it in the 8 precepts, because you're trying to fast the senses. You're trying to have a kind of sensory deprivation, deprive the senses, for the purposes of strengthening your inner exploration, your inner experience. I could say that a more general consideration about the senses and sense desire, certainly the Buddha spoke a lot about the dangers of sense desire, But I find people often take it the wrong way in one of two ways. Some people just don't want to hear it. They're too addicted to the sense objects, so they just disregard that, and kind of makes the whole exercise pointless. But the other extreme is to regard it in a kind of puritanical way. There's nothing unethical about lawfully obtained sense pleasures, as long as they're not stolen or forced or like that. It's not an ethical breach, but it does prevent indulging in sense experience is a hindrance to developing higher states of mind. It should be understood that way. Certainly, if one leads a blameless, moral, ethical life, there's a chance of being reborn in the sensual heavens, and you get all kinds of sense pleasures there. So it's not that sense pleasures are sinful in some way, but they're a hindrance to developing higher states of consciousness. And as long as you're engaged in playing around with the senses, you're not going to go into jhana. It's just a hindrance that keeps you stuck on this first level of consciousness. Now, the jhana factor of Ekagattā is particularly useful for overcoming sense desire, because when you're indulging in sense desire, the mind is not unified. You're going from object to object. You're like a bee smelling the flowers, going from flower to flower. The mind is playing around. But the more the mind is unified, the less that happens. So you need to develop this stillness of mind, and we could say externally and internally. Externally, the practice of sense restraint, of deliberately not going out through the senses. As I mentioned, the 8 precepts, but just generally maintaining an inward focus. That is seclusion of the body, kaya vivek, and that will be the first step. But then there's the internal restraint, the citta vivek, which you don't you prevent the mind from going off into these pastures, but remaining solidly on the object. And what really needs to be developed here for development of deep samadhi is the skill or knack of non-attention. When various impingements occur in the mind, whether thoughts or memories or daydreams or external things like sounds and smells, not to heed them, not to fight with them or try and suppress them, but just let them fade away in the background by non-attention. As long as they're not paid attention to, they're not fed any energy, they will dissipate, they will fade away, they won't grasp the mind and hold it. And you can get closer and closer to this ideal of a unified mind. So the only thing that you're letting into the mind deliberately is the chosen object, whether it's the breath or a kasina or a mantra or whatever it might be. You make that the object of the mind, and everything else you let it fade away by non-attention. I've found over the years that a lot of people, particularly Westerners who come to Buddhism, everyone has a different life story, but a lot of us started, and this was my case, we started our meditation career with some form of vipassana. It was the first approach to Buddhist meditation. And I did vipassana for several years before I took up samatha meditation. So I understand the problem that people who, and that's sort of backwards from the traditional way of doing it. You should get good samadhi first before you do vipassana for the best results. But it is what it is. And what happens when people are trained in vipassana and used to practicing that way is they have difficulty understanding or really practicing non-attention, because that's the opposite in vipassana. You pay attention to everything. But with samatha meditation, you disregard these impinging objects. They're nothing but a distraction, a nuisance. They're not something to be looked at or taken interest in. And you're striving more and more for this unity of mind. So you set that up as your goal or your lodestone. You're aiming towards a unity of mind, so that you make less and less room for other objects, particularly objects of the senses. And when you're developing meditation, you'll see when the mind is not behaving the way it should, when your meditation is not progressing, you'll see that it's these 5 hindrances or nivarnas that are pulling you away one way or the other. And it's the jhana factors that attenuate and suppress these hindrances and allow the mind to settle into that deep samadhi and oneness of mind that is really a very natural, basic, primordial state of mind. It's our natural heritage. It's something that's inherent in us. This is a very useful way to think about jhana, not as some exotic, esoteric state way out there that's some kind of brand new thing. It's a natural, inherent state of mind. It's a primordial state of mind that we don't ordinarily experience only because we're distracted by the hindrances. It's like the Tibetan imagery of the clear blue sky obstructed by clouds. The clear blue sky is always present, even on the most heavily overcast day. It's just hidden behind the clouds. And when the clouds disperse, the blue sky is just there waiting. It always has been there, always will be there. Okay, so that concludes this talk and this series on the jhana factors and hindrances. And I'll stay online now and answer questions that you can type into the chat. Okay, we got one right away here. Venerable Ajahn, the Buddha said about the greedy person, greedy, engrossed, infatuated with pleasures, they are incorrigibly entered on an uneven path. Does this mean that some people, no matter what we do, will never change, and it's futile to show them the truth? Well, I don't think anyone is absolutely hopeless. Even Devadatta, it said that it was predicted that in a future time he would become a Pacceka Buddha. But some people are not going to make it this lifetime. I think that's clear. The Buddha's teaching was given for those with little dust in their eyes. Is the empty space katina mentioned in the Sutta Pitaka? How does one practice this? I think it is. It's described in the Visuddhimagga. All those descriptions are based on scriptural origins. I don't have a citation on hand. The way to practice space katina is to pay attention to an open space, like a open window in the wall, an opening. Space, to understand the nature of space as it was understood in the Buddhist texts, space as an abstract concept has no reality. What we're talking about here is constructed or conditioned space, like the opening in a wall or a well, something like that. That's space. So you're paying attention to the space created by the surrounding object. So it's not the space kasina is not at all the same contemplation as the formless abiding of boundless space. Something quite different and much more focused. Next one. Is it stated why Pacceka Buddha does not teach the Dharma after awakening? Is it perhaps because Pacceka Buddha is not at the same level of compassion as Sammasamma Buddha? It's a little bit false to say that they don't teach. There's stories about the Pacceka Buddhas taking disciples, but they don't. They're not able to teach them the way to enlightenment. They teach them the way to jhana and the way to better rebirth. They're not able to teach them the way to enlightenment, even though they've experienced it themselves. And I don't think it's necessarily a level of compassion that's lacking, but the skill of teaching. So it would be like the wisdom faculty is not as developed as the Buddha. They don't have they don't possess that skill of instruction or teaching, which is said by the Buddha to be the highest of the psychic powers. So it's one thing for someone to attain that supreme awakening, but it's very rare for someone like the Buddha to be able to then formulate a system and explain to people how they can get there themselves. Does Kāmacchanda include mental desire? Example, desire for pleasure from thought. If so, what is meant by the advice from some teachers to gladden your mind? Technically, Kāmacchanda only refers to the 5 chords of physical sense desire. It doesn't really include purely mental desire. There is one of the iddhipadas, one of the roads to success is chanda, which applied to jhana means that you have a desire for samadhi. You have a desire for piti and sukha. So that's not a nivarana, that's not a hindrance. Chanda is just a general term meaning desire, or sometimes it's translated something like enthusiasm. And it's modified by different objects. So Kāmacchanda is desire for 5 sense organ experience. Any advice on lying down meditation while falling asleep? Yeah, that's actually a good thing to do. I would first of all say that posture, try and if you're trying to develop a meditation as you fall asleep, try and lie in the lion's pose, which means this is the way the Buddha always lay down. Lie on the right side with your head on your hand and your upper leg slightly bent and your other arm down the side of your body. correct pose, and then rest the mind on an object like the in and out breathing. Um, but if you're intending to sleep, then you just meditate lightly, and you don't try and force it, or you'll just stay awake. Um, it's very interesting. If you can do that, you can watch yourself, you can remain conscious while going to sleep. It's a very interesting process, and you can learn a lot from it. One other tip is to, before you commence, make a resolution. You're going to try and notice the last breath falling asleep and the first breath waking up. Is it possible to unify the mind using a concept like hiri? Hiri is sense of, it's usually translated as shame. Hiri, a note of a shame and moral dread, which it's another translation I really don't like. It's so off-putting. But hiri is like having a self-respect. Like you have too much self-respect to do something gross or stupid. I would think it's not, a concept like that is not a real good one for trying to unify the mind, because it's too kind of abstract, and just to grasp it, would involve a lot of conceptual thought. So I think it would be difficult to unify the mind on it. Something like metta would be better, because it's basically an emotional state. It's very simple. It's not complicated. You can just rest in that emotional state, unify the mind on that. What can resolve the hindrances in the way of growth? Well, that was kind of the point of this whole series, that developing the jhana factors will diminish the hindrances. Also, unifying the mind, developing piti and sukha, and so on. I once read the sutta the Buddha spoke to Rahula before teaching jhana. He said, hold your mind like this: earth, space, fire, water, air. How can this be interpreted and practically used? This is a variation on contemplation of the elements, the four elements. It's one of the Anusati type meditations. It's not really possible to take that meditation too far. You might be able to get as far as first jhana with it, but it does involve conceptual thought, so you wouldn't go any further. It's in a way, it's more of a vipassana meditation, contemplation of the four elements. It's actually a very good one for developing insight into the nature of body-mind. I found that certain positions, like hugging the pillow, are more linked to connection and intimacy, while lying down regularly or at Paridhavana posture is more balanced. Yes, there's an interesting sutta, and I think it's in the Anguttara Nikaya. I'm pretty sure it's in the Anguttara. It talks about the different postures for sleeping, and sleeping on the right side is said to be conducive of sensual mind. Sleeping on the left side is conducive of higher consciousness. Sleeping on the back is the mind of a peta, or hungry ghost, and sleeping on the belly is animal level consciousness. Breath meditation while falling asleep. How to manage not making it cross over to regular breath meditation. Well, I think you'll find, if you just try it, you'll find, you'll gradually just, the mind will soften and fall asleep. If you're trying to do lying meditation and not sleep, you'll find it's very difficult. It's the hardest posture, because the mind tends to get sleepy when you lie down. Can Ekagattā arise without piti? Well, yeah, in third and fourth jhana, there's Ekagattā without piti. What is the Dhamma view of being on the receiving end of bad Christmas birthday gifts? Is it the receiver's karma, as in this what you deserve, or only the giver's karma? I think you shouldn't be so greedy as to complain about something you're given for free, whether it's any good or not. You're given it. And yeah, it's kind of your karma. And if you have really good karma, you get really good gifts, I guess. What is the best thing to do when painful and unpleasant sensations arise during meditation? Should one just feel them intensely until they pass away on their own, or should I do something else? That depends primarily on whether you're trying to do vipassana or samatha. In this series, I've been talking about samatha meditation. So in samatha meditation, you would not focus on them. You would try and disregard them. And actually, if you get good at developing samadhi, it's a way of escaping from pain in the body. As the Buddha experienced in his last year of life, when he had very intense pains in the body as he got closer to death, but the only time he told Ananda, the only time I'm free of pain is when I'm sitting in fourth jhana. So if intense or even minor pains arise in the body during meditation and you go towards them, you're basically going out to the senses, right? You're experiencing a sense of touch in the body. You're taking a negative interest in that. So that would be the hindrance of vyapada. And that will prevent piti from arising. But if you disregard them and just stay with your object and just disregard them as you would any other object and let them fade away in the background. But once you get deep enough into jhana, you don't experience those things. You don't notice them. It's called putting the body away. You don't even notice that you've got a body. Is second jhana recognizable through a pure unification of mind and internal confidence? I've been given conflicted information concerning these terms associated with second jhana. Yeah, I think I talked about this a bit in the introductory lecture to this series, that if you study jhana, if you listen to different teachers and read different books, you're going to find all kinds of contradictory information. Different definitions, different terms applied. It can be a source of confusion and frustration, but it doesn't need to be. I think, and this is again one more maybe conflicting interpretation, but I prefer to think of the progress of the jhanas as a continuum, as a spectrum of increasingly deep samadhi. It's like you've got a highway and you put up a signpost. This is first jhana, starts here. Second jhana starts here. And someone else comes along and says, no. First jhana doesn't start till you're another 100 meters down the road. But the road remains the same. The terms of first, second, third jhana and these factors like pure unification and internal confidence, these are labels and mental concepts we apply to an experience. We can get lost in all these details and technicalities, whereas jhana is, in its experience, is intrinsically simple. And so don't get lost and caught up in these definitions. Just try and deepen samadhi. Next one. Let's say if any one of us reborn as devas, what should we do to not fall into sensual trap and obtain enlightenment? It's more difficult to attain. It's not impossible, but it's much more difficult as a deva to attain enlightenment than it is as human. Humans have that kind of sweet spot in the universe, in that most humans, most of the time, have a balance in their lives of ease and suffering. So they've got enough suffering to remind them there's something wrong, but they have enough space and ease that they can practice and do something about it. The lower realms are so overwhelmed with suffering, it's hopeless for them. And the Dewa realms is very difficult because they're so caught up in sense pleasures. One thing that it is in one of the commentaries, it said one of the ways to prepare yourself skillfully for a Dewa rebirth is to memorize passages of Dhamma, because then they'll come back to you as a Dewa. If you have memorized passages of Dhamma, they can come, because Dewas generally have some recollection of their past lives, and something that's really imprinted on you, like a memorized sutta, will come back to you. How does one develop the jhanas as counter to hindrances without grasping, striving, clinging? I think the key is the way you think about it, the sort of attitude that you develop towards it. And if you're thinking of the jhanas as some kind of like scorecard or some kind of prizes that you get, then it gives you entirely the wrong attitude. You should think emphasis should be on simplifying and purifying. You're not really getting anything. You're not going anywhere. You're not gaining anything. You're losing stuff. You're dropping away stuff and allowing a more natural state of mind to shine forth. So if your focus is on diminishing the hindrances, then everything else will fall into place. Have you ever met anyone practicing alone like the Rhinoceros Sutta? Do you see this method as helpful and skillful? Would you recommend it in certain situations? I have. I've met, I'm thinking, I've probably met more than one, but one monk comes to mind immediately, a monk I knew in Thailand who very much liked living all alone and not, very rarely would he come and mingle with anybody else. And I think that is a useful practice for once you're established in practice, once you kind of know what you're doing. To seek out solitude and practice alone can be a useful experience, even to do it for some time, even if not a lifetime, but just to do it for some fixed length of time, to live in solitude. But if you don't have a good established practice, then it can be kind of dangerous. You can go kind of crazy. I am glad I made you laugh, and I am sorry to bother you again, Bhante, but could you relate this receiver's karma to your previous video on generosity? The connection is unclear in my mind. Yeah, well, there's two things here. There's generosity and there's gratitude. Someone makes good karma by being generous, but you also make karma by expressing and feeling gratitude. And the Buddha said gratitude is very rare in this world. So if someone gives you a gift you don't really like, maybe they buy you a sweater that you know you're never going to wear, it's got a weird design on it, you'll never wear this thing, you wouldn't be seen dead at it, but it's the thought that counts, right? Someone's being kind, bought you the sweater, and you don't complain about it, just receive it graciously. Good evening, Venerable. Did Lord Buddha philosophically go reality in dualism or non-dualism? Or is philosophy hindrance? The Buddha deliberately avoided questions like that. His teaching was always practically oriented to getting us liberated. And if people are hung up on philosophical definitions of dualism, non-dualism, uh, infinite universe, non-infinite universe. These things don't help lead to liberation. They can be kind of fun to speculate about, but they're not. They don't really deal with the issue of suffering and the end of suffering. So I would say he didn't really come down one way or the other on that, or many of these kind of philosophical questions. In many cases, he just refused to answer them. They're called the Abhyakadadhammas, the unanswered questions. Okay, so we're come to a natural conclusion here, I think, and next week we'll be back, and I haven't decided on a topic. We'll have to start something new next week. We concluded this series on the jhana factors and the hindrances. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again.